Hello, everyone who's joined so far. Just waiting for everyone to get into the meeting room before we get started. All right, it looks like we probably have most everybody in the session. So I am going to go ahead and get started. Um, First of all, welcome and thank you for joining our panel discussion about women in leadership. I'm Jane Miller. I'm the chair of the board for World Urban Parks, and I will be moderating today's panel. I'm so excited that we have a geographically and ethnically diverse panel of outstanding women leaders from around the globe to talk about their experiences and perspectives as women leaders. It's truly an honor to be with all of you. Just really excited about today. Our discussion today will focus on the challenges and opportunities that each face as women leaders. I have a few slides I want to share with you to set the stage for us today, and then you will meet the panelists and we will begin our discussion. All right, here we go. Often, people view or think of leadership in the hierarchy on the left. As a leader, however, it often feels like the picture on the right, juggling a lot of things all over the place, all of the time. I was told early in my leadership career that if I was working in my comfort zone, I was not doing my job. This is very often true. As a leader, we are faced with challenges and opportunities that generally have no set answers, things that are very rarely black and white. You work in the gray zone most of the time, and you are often faced with issues and challenges that require you to rely on transferring knowledge from your past experiences. The next series of slides will provide data about women in leadership. I'm disappointed that I was unable to find more international data about women in leadership. But from what I was able to gather, it appears that much of the statistics for women in leadership are similar around the world. This is from the Center for American Progress in 2018, looking at women in leadership in Fortune 500 companies. 60% of the women have undergraduate and master's degrees as compared to 40% of men. Yet women in these Fortune 500 companies, only 4.6% of the CEOs are held by women. This slide is from the Pew Research study of US adults in 2014, looking at differences between men and women in political office. Between 55 and 68% of American adults saw no difference between men and women in these situations. But 34% felt that women were better at working out compromises and being honest and ethical. And 25% felt that women were better at standing up for their beliefs despite political pressure. Again, from the Pew Research, looking at women CEOs in Fortune 500 companies between 1995 and 2014. Over that 20-year period, we went from 0 women in CEO positions to just 5% women CEOs in Fortune 500 companies. And remember from a previous slide, in 2018, it dropped to 4.6%. This information is from the Pew Research study of US adults in 2018 and their views of women in high political office and women in top executive positions having children. Most striking to me is the 34% who believe women who aspire to be in top executive positions should not have children. And this is just in 2018. This slide is a look at international data of women in leadership roles across 10 countries from the Global Women Entrepreneur Leaders Research in 2015. Women are best represented in board roles and least represented in CEO roles. it is important to note that the highest percent of representation is only 33% for women in France in senior manager roles. Another international look from Pew Research data from 2014 and 2016 about nations with women in leadership roles, and it is bleak. 77 countries have never had a woman leader. Only 42 countries have had women leaders between 1 and 5 years of their history. And only 4 countries around the whole world have had women leaders for 15 or more years. This information is from Race to Lead, looking at nonprofit leadership in the US in 2019. This slide looks at the impact of race and gender on career advancement. White men have a 61% positivity impact, while white women have a 47% positivity impact. Latino women have a 42% positivity impact. However, Asian Pacific Island women have a negative impact of 38%, and Black women have a 43% negativity impact. Another look at Race to Lead in 2019 study looked at salary for those with master's degrees or above by race and gender. In the $100,000 or more category of salary, the percent of people making that much are 38% white men, 29% men of color, 19% women of color, and 15% white women. Slide 12, this last slide is a McKinsey study in the US looking at the percentage of LGBTQ women in management. In senior VP and C-suite positions, only 0.6% LGBTQ women are in VP positions. Only 0.7% are vice presidents, and only 1.2% are senior managers or directors. Some stark statistics in this day and age of the condition of women in leadership positions, just to set the stage. So I am really pleased to introduce colleagues and friends from around the world who are panelists today. Our first panelist I want to introduce is Kobe Brent. Kobe is responsible for strategic direction, growth, partnerships, and programs and scope of work for ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability in Africa. And Kobe, I know that you've just gotten a new title, so I may be giving your title wrong, as Regional Director of ICLEI Africa. ICLEI Africa connects leaders, accelerates action, and provides a gateway to solutions through capacity building, projects on the global ground, and policy influence. Kobe has more than 25 years of practical and managerial experience in environmental management and urban development, including biodiversity, climate change, coastal management to urban sustainability and planning. Kobe is also the Global Director for ICLEI's biodiversity and nature-based solutions work, and in that capacity heads up the city's biodiversity center embedded in ICLEI Africa. Kobe, welcome, and say a few words, please.
Thank you so much, Jane, and what an honor and pleasure it is to join this fantastic panel of women leaders. I feel very proud to be here today amongst fellow strong women. And I would like to say just one thing as an introductory remark. You know, I think what makes it wonderful to be a woman in a leadership position is that none of us are scared to surround ourselves with women, strong women, women leaders. Many of the people that work in my organization are far better qualified than I am. They're much younger than I am. They're much more talented and diverse than I am. So I think, you know, that's one of the wonderful things about being a woman in leadership, that we're not scared to appoint other women and to surround ourselves with strong women, and actually push the boundary in terms of creating spaces for partnerships and for for ideas to flourish in a non-competitive way, because there's something that deeply binds us together, whether we are women with families and children or not. Whatever our background is, we as women are nurturers by nature. And I think our connection with Mother Earth is so strong that for us in this field that we work in with nature, we're very privileged to do so, but it comes naturally. I think there's something that's deeper that connects us with what we do. So I see passion all around me in this panel here today, but also in the people and the women that I work with. And yes, of course, I think we'll get there, but in this discussion, but we know that women can indeed multitask. I've got a few secret recipes up my sleeve when I'm on certain Zoom calls with my staff that I have to cook for the family on the side. And if you want to share some of those recipes with me later on, I'm happy to do so. I don't always get succeeded, but there's always a meal on the table at the end of the day. So yeah, I think it's that unique property of being a woman, and especially as a mother, I can also say that, you know, thinking about bringing my two little girls into the world was such a natural experience for me. It was such a connecting experience with Mother Earth, you know, that I really feel that is something that sets us aside and actually puts us in a unique position to make and to restore the link with nature that is so needed in our world today.
Thank you, Colby. And I'm so glad you're with us as well. Now, the next panelist I'd love to introduce is Angelo Izilo, the CEO and founder of Greening Youth Foundation in the United States and West Africa. Under Angelou's leadership, the Greening Youth Foundation has taken up the charge of providing environmental access to underserved children and young adults through its public school initiative and youth conservation core programs. Greening Youth Foundation provides its services throughout the United States and in West Africa. And prior to creating the foundation, Angelou worked as an attorney, then project manager for the Trust for Public Land in its New Jersey and Georgia offices, where she acquired land for preservation and worked on the New York, New Jersey Highlines Program, Parks for People Newark, the New York, New Jersey Harbor Program in New Jersey, the Atlanta Beltway, and the 20-county Regional Green Space Initiative for Georgia. In addition to all of that, Angela also serves on a number of boards, including the Georgia Audubon, the National Recreation and Park Association, and is a member of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights Women in Solidarity Society. She is also an advisory board member for the Arabia Mountain National Heritage Area, the Million Mile Greenway Incorporated, Getting It Wild Incorporated, and Outdoor Afro. And she is a former subcommittee member of the National Park Service's 21st Century Conservation Corps and Planning Rule Federal Advisory Committee Act member and Ashoka Fellow. Whew, Angela, you're up, girl.
I'm muted. Thank you so much, Jane. And I have to also say that it's such an honor to be on this panel with all of these rock stars. Like when I first heard and Jane first extended this invitation, I was like, another panel. But then when I heard who was going to be on it and what we're going to be talking about, I got super excited. So I just want to start off by saying that. And just so I know that was a lot, but just a little bit about me, just a snapshot of who I am. I'm basically just a young, when I started off, was a young brown girl that, you know, had this love for nature and the environment, but because of the way that I looked, wasn't encouraged to go into any field of conservation or environmentalism or anything like that. So I became an attorney, wah, wah, right? No, but I mean, in doing corporate and transactional law, it was fine, but I found my way back to conservation in working for the Trust for Public Land and doing land management and conservation for the state of New Jersey. But the thing was, it was just super lonely. And that's really when I started feeling like this acute feeling of inequality, you know, especially as it related to communities of color. And, you know, these are communities that were seriously impacted by climate crises and so forth. So, you know, the past 15 years, I basically have spent my time focusing on marginalized communities and underrepresented youth and young adults and connecting them to these careers in conservation so that they're not growing up like me without that seeing at young ages what the possibilities can be. But also while breaking down so many barriers to access. I mean, what I'm seeing is there's such an equity access issue, and that's, you know, when it relates to land and parks, jobs, boards, businesses, resources, funds, everything, there's an access issue, particularly surrounding communities of color and even women. So my way forward is really creating more inclusive policies and systems that center equity and shifting power to Black and Indigenous people of color. I see that as the way forward, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with fellow rock stars.
Thanks, Angelou. So thrilled to have you. And Kobe, I did get her title wrong. As of October 1, pretty exciting, drum roll. Kobe is now the new Deputy Secretary General for ICLEI globally. Awesome, Kobe, congratulations. So our next panelist, again, another rock star, Mariana Napolitano Ferrara. She is the co-chair of IUCN WCPA Task Force on COVID-19 and Protected Areas in Brazil. IUCN WCPA is the International Union for Conservation of Nature World Commission on Protected Areas. Mariana serves as its co-chair on the COVID-19 and Protected Areas Task Force. In addition to that, Mariana is also the head of science program for the Worldwide Fund for Nature Brazil. She is a biologist with a PhD in ecology and has been working with protected areas, planning, managing, and advocacy since 2003. Mariana also leads a coalition of NGOs working to strengthen protected areas in Brazil for the last 6 years. She's based in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and has 2 kids. Way to go, Mariana. Welcome, and say a few words.
Thank you, Jane, for the introduction and for inviting me to this panel composed of such inspiring leaders. As Jane mentioned, I've been working with protected areas in Brazil for the last 17, almost 18 years. And I have experienced all the types of work, since field research and community engagement to coordinating a coalition of NGOs, or even following global negotiations and multilateral meetings on this topic. As I was coming to this panel, I was thinking about the challenges of being a woman and working in conservation, especially here in Brazil. And I believe I did not face many challenges as a young woman working in conservation. At least I don't remember them. Maybe because I come from a privileged situation where I'm a white woman, I studied in good universities. Maybe because I had some great inspiring leaders, men and women leaders, who really gave me great advice and opportunities. Or maybe because some of the things that I noticed today and that bothers me today as being a woman actually just passed by at that time. So most of the challenges, they really hit me more recently when I had kids. So as Jane mentioned, I have a 5-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl. And after having them, I felt so much more like the urgency and the willingness to work with conservation, and especially to support and promote more the benefits of parks to people and to children. But at the same time, these guys need me so badly. So you can have the best support system in the world. You're still the one who knows about vaccines, about school assignments, about their friends' parties. And well, I will not even talk about how this year went with schools closed for more than 7 months. So I would stay here forever. But I also think that it goes beyond having children. Actually, more recently, Brazil, and I think other countries in the world, you're facing a rise in an anti-gender ideology with education on gender and sexuality same-sex marriage, feminism, and trans rights actually being more and more attacked. And with this being in the ideology in power here, I felt more than once that I had to be really clear, really strong, you know, and hold my feet, and to avoid being an easy target for being a woman. And it's really strange times when you feel that these things are actually getting worse than getting better. At the same time, I think that as a reaction to all of it, I feel women much more connected and supportive of each other, as Kobe already mentioned. I feel that we can be so much more productive, effective by working with empathy with each other. So some of the most the best work that I've been doing lately and sharing with women are also a very pleasant work to do. And I really believe that that's the way to go. So thank you, and I'm happy to share other thoughts with you today.
Great. Thank you so much, Mariana. Our next panelist is Claire Shine, Vice President and Chief Program Officer at Salzburg Global Seminar, both in Salzburg and the world. Claire is responsible for multi-year program strategy, design, partnerships, and implementation in Salzburg and around the world. Next generation leadership development, communications and marketing, and the Salzburg Global Fellowship, which straddles nearly 170 countries. She has played an influential role in global biosecurity, biodiversity policy development, working as legal advisors to the World Bank, the European Union, Council of Europe and African governments, and led environmental capacity building projects across 4 continents. Claire is a UK qualified barrister, an associate of the Institute for European Environmental Policy, a member of the IUCN Commission on Environmental Law, and a bilingual French speaker and professional facilitator. Claire, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here as well.
Hi, Jane. Hi, everybody. It's just such fun to be in this kind of conversation. Listening to the others, and it's true for me, I'm always struck by how many hats women can wear and choose to wear, and how comfortable we are with fluidity and multiple identities. I think that is one of the most useful tools as we go into this decade of action. For myself, I have done a kind of crazily different number of things, and it took me a very long time to make sense of my own journey. I think it was when I was writing my letter of application for the job I now hold. What I now know, but I didn't understand then, is that even when I was young, I felt passionately invested in change, in social justice. My family had big disparities within my different siblings, and I felt a great sense of being a mother to my more vulnerable younger brother. And that applied itself then to engaging in community level projects. And often nature was a very big part of that. I have Irish roots from the countryside, and my father, who has just died, was passionate about trees. And I still remember, it's one of my most special memories, going out each day to discover a new tree with my dad. And as that matured, my exposure to environment, equity, and gender issues really came with my wish to learn on the ground myself. And so before I went to college, I spent a year in community development in Sri Lanka, and the civil war broke out in my own communities while I was still there. That changes your mind map. I had so much to learn from my host communities, and I think I'm the professional I am now because of what I saw at first hand, and the humility and the realism that it taught me. As Jane said, I've had a bit of a wild ride through a liberal arts degree and then business, law, and so on. But as a woman, you have these tough choices to make. And in my case, having become a barrister, which is like an attorney, and it's very tough, especially then, for a woman to get a position. My now husband had the chance of a once in a lifetime chance to move to France. And that was what pushed me to take a big risk and go back to study on the very frontiers of sustainable development, which at that time was a brand new discipline. And very briefly, what I realized very soon was that gender and power hierarchies came in very fast after the Rio summit in 1992. I had jumped onto the biodiversity horse. I was not a scientist, but I wanted to understand about ecosystems, about nature, indigenous peoples, and our relationship with the natural systems and planetary boundaries. But very quickly, the shift of interest, energy, money, and influence went to the other convention signed that day, which was the Climate Change Convention. And I would suggest that it's taken well over 20 years to come back to understanding the interdependence there. And the other thing I would like to say briefly is that what I saw mirroring that was that political cabinets around the world started bringing in women as ministers, but for culture, early childhood development, and nature. And once climate became mainstream, we saw a masculinization of political representation around climate, energy, and industry. And it took us quite a while to start to see a much more truer reflection of the different parts of society. So lots of ideas there to share, but very happy to explore that with a group of this caliber. Jane.
Claire, thank you. Thank you. Our next panelist, who I'm thrilled to introduce, is Latrice Sneed. She is the Chief Program Officer for the National Park Foundation here in the United States. Latrice oversees programmatic strategies for protecting parks and their resources, connecting people to the natural and cultural heritage they preserve, and strengthening the extensive national network of nonprofit partners that support the more than 400 national parks across the United States. Latrice brings with her 2 decades of experience working for mission-driven organizations, excelling in all areas of programmatic leadership, strategy, fundraising, and communications while building relationships with diverse stakeholders. Prior to joining the National Park Foundation, Latrice served as Global Director of the Nature Conservancy's Build Healthy Cities program, where she supported the development of nature-based solutions for the most pressing challenges facing cities around the world. From generating mega cities to creatively engaging the world's billions of city dwellers with nature, she actively promoted strategies that foster an equitable future where all people have access to nature and its benefits. Latrice also directed the Nature Conservancy's Global Volunteer and Community Outreach Program, where she launched Connect with Nature, a nationwide initiative that has linked thousands of people with natural areas and meaningful volunteer opportunities. Latrice lives in Washington, D.C., in the metropolitan area with her husband, son, and now a puppy. Latrice, welcome.
Just one more thing to take care of and to balance, right?
That is so right.
Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to join this panel. When Jane reached out, I was really excited because I knew most of the women on this panel. So it's really fun to get to know them and work with them in a different way. When I started out my career, I never looked at myself really going down the path of leadership. And like Angelou, I definitely did not see myself in the conservation space. But I'm here now. And I would say that, over time, I have worked for some really, really great leaders. And I've also worked with some really terrible leaders. And I think I've learned more from the terrible leaders because I know what not to do when leading people and efforts and, the way you feel. And I think that's a big role of, leadership is, how do you, I think Mariana mentioned, lead with that empathy and engaging folks. So Jane, thank you for opening up this conversation with some of the research that you shared. I was thinking just about my journey while listening to some of that research, and I look forward to kind of digging into that and sharing our perspectives and talking about it more.
Thanks, Latrice, and I'm so glad you're on this panel as well. Thank you. And final, but not least, as I said earlier, Christine, is Christine Stratton. Christine is the president and CEO of the National Recreation and Park Association in the United States. NRPA is the leading not-for-profit organization dedicated to building strong, healthy, and resilient communities through the power of parks and recreation. It advances this vision by investing in and championing the work of park and recreation professionals as a catalyst for positive change in service of equity, climate readiness, and overall health and well-being. NRPA's network of more than 60,000 park and recreation professionals in the United States and our advocates represents public spaces in urban communities, rural settings, and everything in between. NRPA champions and supports the field of parks and recreation through professional development, advocacy, grants and programs, research, publications, and so much more. Before coming to NRPA, Christine was the Senior Vice President of Operations at Earth Justice, the largest public interest environmental law organization. Prior to that, she served as the Executive Director of the Waterkeeper Alliance in New York, New York. And before that, she was Vice President of Operations at the Conservation Law Foundation in Boston, Massachusetts. Again, another woman who's doing amazing work in a varied background. Christine, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be with all of you. I've been looking forward to this conversation. My passion is the intersection between people and the environment. And that's why I'm so thrilled to be working at the NRPA and working with all of this wonderful group of people who really care about healthy environments and healthy communities. The roots for me of that passion really come from, I grew up in a small rural community in northern Maine, which was a paper mill town. And I was nested in this beautiful wilderness with mountains and trails and all of this wonderful exposure. And yet in our community itself, we had above average rates of asthma because of air pollution from the mill. I grew up across a little stream that we were all afraid to go near because it was so polluted. And so this awareness of that, of the impact of our built systems and our economic drivers on people's health and our environment was something I had an awareness of pretty early on. Another thread here is I completed a business degree back in the very early 90s. And one thing that I found really fascinating is the study of business and leadership and culture and how that has shifted. I mean, it's an evolving practice, of course, but it's so fascinating to me to look and reflect back on the things that I was taught in my undergrad and to think about how our current culture building and organizational practices have changed so much for the better. It's exciting to me to be in a world now where we're invested in creating inclusive cultures and to really honoring the whole person when we show up at work and trying to create safe spaces so that people can bring their whole selves. So I feel that will only enrich our experiences, our dialogue, our organizational work, and hopefully continue to increase the positivity of outcomes and impact that we're seeking to have. So I'm happy to be here and again to have this conversation with all of you.
Christine, thank you and welcome. So now, not only did everyone get to hear about these amazing backgrounds and work that these women have been doing, now you get to hear some more personal stuff. We're going to have a Q&A session that I will ask specific questions to each of the panelists for about 30-35 minutes. And then I will open it up for attendees if you want to put any questions in that you would like to ask. Please put them in the chat room in Zoom, and I will get to those after we get through the Q&A of what I'm asking. So Christine, I'm going to start with you. My first question for you is, what, if any, distinctions do you see between informal leadership and formal leadership? And do you see those lines blurring?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they're definitely blurring, and I'm personally extremely happy about that. I think that in this current environment, formal leadership has the implications of formal leadership have changed quite a bit, in my view. There's a much more intense accountability. I think that we hold our leaders to, our formal leaders. And with 24/7 media cycles and social media, it's the movement for racial equity, the Me Too movement, all of these social drivers that are really calling for change and greater accountability and fundamental shifts in terms of what the expectations are. The pressure on formal leadership to respond to all of those movements in a positive way and to fundamentally shift culture, I think is pretty intense. Rightly so. I also think that, again, this I was talking about inclusion and shifting our organizational cultures that really enable people to bring their full selves, because we know there's plenty of scientific research and information out there that supports the fact that diverse work environments are more productive, have better outcomes. And so creating environments where you actually enable all of your team to step forward and really step into that informal leadership to shape the direction of the organization, to shape how we're doing what we're doing. I think all of those ingredients are kind of mixing together in maybe one of Kobe's recipes and creating something that's wholly new. So I do think the lines are definitely blurring, and it's 100% for the better. So it's my answer to your question. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Thanks, Christine, and thanks for your insight. And that's what this panel discussion is about, is you all have been through so many different experiences that sharing that in your perspectives is really valuable. So thank you for doing that, Christine. Angelou, question for you is, can you tell me about your experience and advice you can provide others for working in a male-led industry?
Oh, how much time do we have? When I first started out, as I shared, as a corporate attorney, it was and I was younger, so it was a very rigid structure of, who could speak up and who was kind of in the leading role in, cases, or just in how you showed up at the law firm. And then even in the environmental space, when I moved into that, it was male dominated, and it was still this feeling of, they're running the show. So I think that I almost remember it distinctly when I was like, wait a minute, I know this stuff. Why can't I be the one that, speaks up and commands the crowd and the audience? And, so I really think my advice would be, know your stuff. Like, be the very best at what you do and be that expert. And then with that comes confidence, so right now, like, there isn't a room that I go in and I don't feel like I can speak up and say my truth. Obviously that comes from years of experience and studying, and, but it also is a confidence thing. So I think the exciting thing, if I can extrapolate something exciting from 2020, is that we've seen that leadership right now, I feel like it's, the Wizard of Oz, when you kind of look behind that curtain, you have like this image of, this voice of who's kind of leading things. And then you look behind the curtain, you're like, oh, it's just this little dude and he don't really know what he's talking about. So I feel like right now that we can all, women in particular, can come into their own and feel that there's no longer this prescriptive formula or recipe for, leadership and what it needs to look like, and particularly from a gender perspective. So I think it's an exciting time for women leaders. From my perspective, women leaders of color that are really coming into their own and now have so much confidence in everything to back it up.
Great. Thanks, Angelou. It's so cool to listen to all of you. So next question, so I can listen more. Kobe, you are juggling a lot at work as now the Deputy General of ICLEI Worldwide. At home, you're mother, you're a daughter of aging parents. How do you balance your personal life and obviously your very successful career?
Jane, you know what? I mean, I don't think we ever get that balance 100% right. And every day, maybe some days are better than others. But I think I feel very privileged that I still have my parents and I can take care of them in my own home. They live adjacent to my home, so I see them at least twice a day. I'm able to look out for them and see that they get nutritious food, etc. It's a privilege. It's not always easy. Not none of they're both not healthy anymore. They're 85, both of them, long married, still very much in love, still very much together. But it's just wonderful to have them with us in the house. I must also say that let's not forget about the wonderful men that are there that support women like us. And my husband, a lot needs to go to him tonight. It's evening here where I'm sitting in Cape Town, and he's cooking the dinner tonight, so that I can be with you, and he's doing it very happily. So I think I would also like to refer to one of my very first bosses was well, most of my bosses were men actually, but one of them really saw in me that little bit of a rebel spirit, that spirit that needed to be set free, and he gave me wings. He let me do my thing. And I mean, those 10 years that I was working for the national government of South Africa on coastal management, we did wonderful things together. And some of them are still legacies in this country. And it was only because my boss gave me wings. I earned peanuts. I had no title whatsoever. It didn't matter. I loved what I was doing. And he was not micromanaging me. So when I bring women into my company, when I bring anybody into my company, it's all about giving them those wings. It's all about a woman leader once said to me that being a good leader is taking people to places where they never think they could go, but in a way that once they get there, they know they always were meant to be there. So, that sort of helps me to guide my people in a way that they feel empowered, so that when I need to step out and be a mother and be a daughter and be a wife to my husband, or a caregiver in my community, I know that I can count on the people around me, and whether they're the women or the men. And just one example, let's just think about the youth. We all come from experience, but we have many young people also in our company, and it's not always the years of experience. It's that bravery, that new millennial thing that is so wonderful in the youth today. They just think they can conquer everything. And I have one person in my office, I can talk about many, but one person, Jessica Kavanic, she's a young lady, but she has walked across the US by foot, and she's also pathed a new way up the mountains of Nepal. And for that, she created that pathway with just a Sherpa with her. And for 6 weeks, she did that, and she got to name that pathway after her. Well, she not her, but she could name it. And she's much younger than I am. She's much braver than I am, and I get my courage from young people like them and from other women like yourselves. So juggling, not easy, don't always get it right, and that's also okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So true, Kobe. So true. Thank you. Mariana, or actually, no, Claire, let me ask you a question, kind of to shoot off of what Kobe was saying. Do you find that men face the same challenge as women, balancing personal and work lives? And how do we help men and women understand and better share the challenges of balancing personal and work life?
Great big question. If you are in a partnership, whether with a man or a woman, choose well. Do the talking upstream. I think I've been very lucky to be in quite a modern relationship in many ways. I never changed my name, even for my personal life. And I think in some way that's helped. I think that women can be their own worst enemies. And some of my most judgmental, bad moments have been at the hands of other women who, of course, intended no harm. I've been told to my face by women I love and admire that they've never met a working mother who got the balance right. And as we've already heard, there is no such thing as the right balance, regardless of where you spend your days and so on, but it can be very hurtful at the time. I think that it is still easier for men to own their leisure time. And something I'm trying to get better at myself, and I encourage my mentees to really think about, is something that energizes you, excites you, that has nothing to do with your work or your family identity. I think that can be an enormous strength, both of creativity and resilience as you go through life. I was really bad at that, and I'm trying to catch up my ground now. But many of the male business leaders that I know have kept up the rather bad rock bands that they've played in since their 20s, or something that gave them an outlet away from work. In terms of progress, there's been great progress, although it's not too widespread, in terms of attitudes to sharing work with or family responsibilities with younger children. And so many of my male friends are just awesome at that. I do think that we are facing all kinds of stubborn gender inequities in the young child space, but particularly around care for elders. I'm Kirby, and many of you are also in that sandwich situation. I've got 3 kids, although they're now in their 20s, and obviously the elder generation as well. And I think that the narratives being told in society now have perfect men being perfect with perfect children, but a lot less around what is a very, very important growing reality about elder care and the set of financial implications that go with that. So I would like to see honesty, openness, and realism with men as well as women about what that really means for professional life chances and family structures. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Claire. Again, such great insight you all are providing. It's awesome. Mariana, what would you say to yourself or to others as young women starting to work in conservation?
Well, I would say be confident, be bold, ask for support, and especially something that I'm still struggling with, I don't know you all, but don't be afraid of saying no, so focus on your priorities, and don't do things just because you feel that you have to respond to others' expectations. I think this is something that we juggle a lot with. And even bringing some of the questions in the chat box about also mentors, and something that I think some of you already mentioned too. I think this is also, for me, it was really something that make a difference in my career. So get close to the people that inspire you. Don't be afraid to reach to those people, So I had a great opportunity. I joined WWF in 2009, and I was 29 years old. And I had this boss, and he just 1 year working with him, he called me to his room, and he said, Mariana, you're going to CBD, the Convention of Biological Diversity in Japan. You're supporting us in Brazilian negotiations, etc. But you're doing the whole thing. You're also carrying boxes and everything. That's fine. I said, great, let's do it. And I learned so much with that experience. So I think that also, be open, ask, and find those people, reach to them. I think this is something that also was really helpful for me.
Great, great. Thanks, Mariana. Latrice, I have a great question for you. As a female leader, what has been the most significant barrier in your career?
It's a big one. I would say that it's probably myself sometimes. I think many of you have heard about imposter syndrome, when you have, these doubts about your skills and talents. And there were so many times when I just didn't think that I could, take on a new position, or I was worried about checking all the boxes when looking at that, position description. And then to Angelou's point, when you look behind the curtain, you're like, okay, I can do this. If these are my peers, I can do this. So I think sometimes it's just, yourself. I remember when the recruiter called me, reached out to me about this position that I'm in right now. And he reviewed the job description and I thought, wow, I said, this is a big position. I said, let me give you some names of people that I think would be great for it. And he said, no, he said, I want you. But even then I'm thinking, I don't know how to do these three things. Whereas men would say, I don't know how to do half of this, but I'm still going to go for it. So, you know, I think a lot of times just the barrier is, you know, is trying to be perfect, trying to fit all the dots and not being willing to take that risk and jump out and, you know, learn as we go. But as you can see, I did eventually listen to the recruiter and I am here in this position now. But that's one of the things that I also try and help other women see is about how to leverage their skills, you know. So you may be in one sector or industry, for example, myself, you know, I've only been in the conservation space for the last 7 or 8 years. But when I transferred into this space, it was just about leveraging the skills and that I had from before, you know, working in youth, working on the for-profit side of the house, and how was I able to leverage those skills in this space? So I think we just have to think about that and help other women also think about how they leverage their skills in new roles and leadership opportunities.
Thanks, Latrice. You know, I want to say, I listening to all of you respond to the questions. I'm also looking at the rest of you who are listening to the responses and seeing so many heads shaking. Oh, yes, yes. So I think, again, this panel is so valuable, not only for ourselves, but for our listeners, because we can all relate to every answer and every response you're giving. So it's really invaluable. Thank you, Latrice. Marianne, I'm going to ask you another question. Can you tell us how or when you felt the support of other women or men, and when they were decisive in developing your career or your leadership?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think that people that took me out of my comfort zone and said to me, yeah, you're doing it. And I said, just like Latrice mentioned, well, me? Really? No, you're doing it, you know? So I think this is the best gift I had from other leaders. I think also there's sometimes that people just came to me and said, you don't need to accomplish it all. Just take it easy, you know? I think it was a great advice too. And I think that we do a lot by example. So there are some groups or initiatives or projects that I participate, and we're mostly women there. And there's so much empathy and care for each other in the room. And I think that taking it to the groups that I lead, to the teams that I lead, and really help us to achieve some other levels of trust, of solving problems with such more easy ways. So I think that sometimes was not something that I hear or something that people told me, but just looking how, you know, relations take place and learning through this. So this is some things that come to my mind.
Great, great. Angelou, as a woman leader of color, tell us about your experience having to choose between the prioritization of gender or race in various settings. And tell us about the importance of intersectionality as you do your work.
Sure. I can start with how I view myself. I don't view myself as a woman. I view myself as a Black woman, a woman of color. So I think in the 90s, you know, when I was saying as a corporate attorney, there was a lot of uncomfortability around me being a woman in that space. And I think there weren't as many women, you know, around in that legal profession. Now in the 21st century, although pay is something that we're still fighting, and obviously there are other issues as we're talking about on this call, my uncomfortability comes around the color of my skin, you know, and the fact that what's happening in society around Black people in general. And I guess for me, it's very personal too, because I have two Black young men as sons, you know, over 6'2", and I have a husband, you know, so seeing what's happening as a result of systemic oppression and racism in America, and how their skin and their race is being weaponized, it's really hard for me to just say, you know, things are going great for Black women, so, you know, we're good. You know, I just can't, like, because, you know, that's my counterpart. The Black man is my counterpart. So, you know, and it's sometimes very challenging positions that you're in. And that's why I stress the importance of intersectionality, and also for allies to understand the importance of intersectionality, because yes, you know, we are fighting for equal rights for women, but there's so many other issues, social issues plaguing our society that we must take in. They have to work concurrently. So, and there's just no way to move it forward unless you view systemic history, but also what's currently happening. And I think that there's no way to look around considering, you know, women of color and not viewing their success as part of a monolith, and not considering what's happening with the Black man in society.
So true.
Latrice, I don't know if you wanted to chime in on that as a Black woman leader. I'm sorry, Jane.
No, Angelou, go. Latrice.
Like you, Angelou, I always see myself as a Black woman, not just a woman, but a Black woman. I think, you know, some of the perceptions and some of the way I lead through that lens, even when it comes up to, you know, speaking up for truth and justice and equity. And, you know, I was just reflecting on just, you know, my leadership as a Black woman, and understanding how many times I've either had to like hold back for fear of being the angry Black woman in the room. And so I've been mistaken for, you know, the assistant, you know, when my staff is around me, you know, hey, can you take these notes at this meeting? You know, so it's that balance of leadership, when it comes to being a Black woman, is something that is always top of mind for me. But like Angelou, also thinking about how connected it is to how we lead within our families, in our spouses, our children. We can't take off this color. When we show up in the room, you instantly know that we are Black, and we carry that with us. And those experiences, I have found that I've needed to share and express how I feel more. And I do feel like things have changed over the years, where I do feel more comfortable in sharing, as a Black woman, this is how you made me feel when you said this or when you said that. I also think it's important to share those experiences with staff. There's a lot of times I share with staff, you know, how a certain situation or a certain experience has made me feel in certain contexts. I had a conversation with my new supervisor and my new boss just recently about a situation that, you know, for me as a Black woman was very hard. And he just didn't even have that opportunity or that lens to see that. So I think it's something that is just one more factor as a woman in leadership, that, you know, I, Angelou, and others have to carry our Blackness as well into consideration.
Yes. Thank
Very
you.
true. Very, very true. Thank you. Thank you both for sharing that perspective, and thanks for carrying the weight that you carry. It's really, really important. Panelists, I'm going to, trying to pay attention time, we've got a number of questions in the chat room. So I am going to shift to those questions, and I'm going to throw them out. The first one I'm going to throw out to Christine. but all of you feel comfortable to step in if you want to chime in a little bit. All right. So the first one, and Christine, I'm going to throw this one out to you. How do we create networking and support opportunities for women in leadership? Conferences like this are a good step to hear success stories and examples, but how do we create opportunities to meet with, identify, and encourage opportunities for women looking to rise up to the occasion and take some more significant leadership roles?
Yeah. Well, a couple of thoughts. One is that mentoring, there's a mentoring question and the mentoring observations before. I always tell younger people to not be afraid to ask for help and not be afraid to ask for someone to specifically, explicitly mentor them. That was advice I got really early in my career, and I've taken it repeatedly. I've never had someone say to me, I can't do that. Never. I've had people say, well, my time's really tight. I could help you with this particular aspect, and maybe just like a once a month call or something like that. I've had people put some boundaries on it, but I've never had someone say no. I think that's really, really, really important. Two other thoughts: creating opportunities to network with other women in a non-competitive, supportive environment is key. And one of Angelou's board colleagues on the NRPA board, Lakita Watson, started Women in Parks and Recreation group on Facebook, not single-handedly, but with a group of women. And they've created a really wonderful space in that forum for people to ask questions and to feel like they've got a support system around their work in Parks and Recreation. So I think whatever we can do as leaders to create systemic ways for women to feel supported and to get that kind of allyship. And speaking of allyship, I think that the topics that Angelou and Latrice were speaking to around, bringing their intersectionality to work and needing, and feeling compelled to, of course, speak their truth, not creating an environment where they have to do that alone, making sure that as a white ally, I, as a leader, I'm creating safe space for those conversations to happen, those difficult conversations to happen. And I'm also taking that burden off my colleagues of color and naming issues when they come up, and microaggressions or whatever it might be, just taking that burden off so that particularly our young women of color feel supported, feel like they have allies, and can generate that confidence so that they can, again, step forward, ask for help, get the mentoring, get the support that they need. So those are a few thoughts I have.
Great. Thanks, Christine. And I want to, yeah, Colby, go, please.
Yeah, could I just give an example here from Africa as well? It
Absolutely.
just came to mind now, and I really appreciate also that question. I feel very strong about us having to create spaces for women leaders to connect, especially in the work that we do. I have the privilege to work with many mayors across the African continent, and I'm very pleased to share with you that just I think this month, yes, in the month of November, Mayor, a very brave Mayor, Lowy, from the Banjul, and that's the capital of the Gambia, was elected as the first woman mayor who is the president of the African Capital Cities Sustainability Forum. And a few weeks before that, she was also elected on the executive committee of the Global Parliament of Mayors. And may I also just add that the African Capital City Sustainability Forum, the first vice president of that forum is also a woman. It's a woman mayor of Dakar. So it's wonderful to see these women leaders stepping up and become recognized in the African and in the global scene. There's much to do still in Africa to empower women to even come forward to these leadership positions, and it's part of our calling here in my office to help and support these women as much as possible, and to encourage the younger generation to come forth and learn from these women and be inspired. And as Angela has said, really, they can do it. Let's not doubt that women can actually lead in any position, whether it's president, mayor, CEO, or just running a household. They are all leaders. by birth, I think.
Very true. And thank you for those examples, Kobe. They really are inspiring. And I just want to take this mentorship a little bit further, and particularly Mariana, Latrice, and Angelou. I'd love your perspectives on this. You know, the role of mentors, how important were those, or sponsors, in helping you advance your career goals? And can you guys give some advice for people who are listening?
For me in particular, having a sponsor was very important. I can share that while I was at the Nature Conservancy, I grew in my leadership over the 7 years I was there. But it was really one particular colleague of mine that really sponsored me and would talk about my leadership, give examples to the rest of the executive team about the things that I was doing within the organization to advance some of our goals and priorities. And I noticed that someone else had asked a question about, just how to get males to understand some of the challenges that you face as a woman. And I remember talking to him about that one time. And I said, when I'm in a meeting, people will naturally defer to you. You're a white male, you look like them. So they're just naturally going to, defer to you when it comes to information questions. He took that in, and what I began to see when we were in meetings together, when someone would ask a question and say, "Hey, Pascal, what do you think about this?" He would turn to look at me and he would say, "Latrice, what do you think? I think Latrice has the information on that." So he began to lift me up in different meetings. But he will also, when people would reach out to him to schedule different meetings, he would then invite me to those meetings. So he would make sure that I had a seat at the table. And then once he had left the organization, and right before he left, we had new leadership. If you've heard about the Nature Conservancy, we had a lot going on about a year ago. And so we had a lot of leadership changes. And before he left, he talked to the new president about me. I did not ask him to do that. I did not know he was doing this. I found out later. But that's what a sponsor does. They say good things to other people about you. They lift you up, even when you're not around, even when you don't have to ask. They're always trying to think of ways that they can support your growth. So I was very thankful for that, because I think, in an organization as large as the Nature Conservancy, with over 4,000 people and it's global, he was able to make sure that I was visible.
Well, that's great. That is really great. Mariana or Angelou?
I was just going to chime in really quick on the whole mentorship piece. Ever since, and how important it is. So ever since I think even just starting with the Trust for Public Land, when I first started that position, I've had, a mentor that has really, it's so critical, because this person, and her name is Audrey Peterman, she always has my best interests at heart. So, even as recent as, me having to kind of make a decision about, a pretty sizable change, if I was going to be going into the political realm, everyone else's response was, "Oh my God, of course you should do that, Angelou. That is an amazing opportunity." Upon telling her about it, she listened, and then she was like, "I don't think so. That sounds like it doesn't sound like what you would want at all at this point in your life." And I was just like, "Oh my God, I love you." So, and now I'm in a position in which I am mentors to other women. And, I feel so blessed to be able to give that back, to young women that are really starting out on their paths and really are trying to balance family. I want to have children, but how might that look in terms of my climb, within this field and within this organization? How would they view that? And, you know, so I just think I can't underscore it enough, the importance of finding, I never necessarily had a sponsor, Latrice, but, and I don't know if that, I'm not sure that I guess to a certain degree, it was a little bit of that as well with this mentor, but definitely want to underscore the importance of having a mentor and being a mentor.
Yeah, yeah, great. Mariana, I'm going to throw a question out to you. This is in the chat room. My male management team is generally supportive of all their employees, but they can also be unaware or tone deaf when it comes to challenges of women aspiring to leadership roles. How would you bring those challenges to their attention in a constructive way?
Well, and I had different male managers, so I know. I think that first of all, I think there are different things. I think that it's important to be very clear and specific and very clear on your ask. So don't expect that your male managers will understand and guess what's going on with you. You know, so one thing that I learned, even in home, is be very clear and specific on your ask. You know, I think this is something that it's not that they don't want to help. Sometimes they just don't get it, you know. So I think that being very clear and specific helps. Other things that I think also help is when you put this in a more broader context. So, okay, this is not only my challenge. This is a challenge of several women working here. So I think this also connects to something. And an example that I have someone that worked for me, and is actually a very good friend. And I just had my kid and I came back after 6 months, and it's okay. I really wanted to come back. So I was fine with it. You know, I didn't bother so much. That's great. But she wanted to keep breastfeeding for a longer time, and she lived far away from her home. So she came to me and said, Mariana, I need to reduce my hours of work from 8 hours to 6 hours, even with a reduced payment. And actually, it never have happened before in the whole history of my institution. And I went door to door, like, why can't we do this? And once we achieved this for her, it also became almost like a policy. You know, you can do it at some point. So I think it also opened the doors to others. But sometimes you just have to say, why not? I need this for this period of time because of that. And I think that usually it happens. Sometimes it doesn't, but usually those male managers that don't listen to women also don't last a lot. So that's fine. You survive them.
Claire, thanks, Mariana. Claire, would you like to offer some advice from your perspective about how to help someone in that, help women in those situations?
I think being open and human is incredibly important. Honesty really matters in this situation. And what I've been listening to about mentorship as well has been a very key part. I think not being frightened to sort of call a spade is very important. And when you see situations to yourself or to other people, which probably, you know, we talk about unconscious bias in terms of racist situations, but they arise a lot in gender situations as well. And calling it out if it happens is very important. I've had that happen to me when, for example, I'm talking about sort of over a span of years, but for example, where the language of, you know, so-and-so is overwhelmed will be used for a woman who may be grappling with younger, older family situations or just a whole load of things, is used to the board, which it wouldn't, in a way, it would not be done for a man, even at exactly the similar situation. So I think that I found it both difficult and hurtful to deal with, but felt much better for putting it out into the open space. The only way I see that we move forward systemically is when, in a respectful way, we don't let any of those things slip by. Because a lot of quite rightly, there's a huge emphasis at the moment on dealing with systemic injustice in racial terms. But I think that we also need to understand when those things slip by on the gender side as well, and call them out. I hope that answered the question.
Thanks.
There's so much more I could say behind.
Yes, absolutely. As we all could with all these questions, isn't that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Christine. How are you helping other women in leadership positions? And the rest of you, I'll ask you guys, ask you to chime in as well, but I want to start with Christine. How are you helping other women into leadership positions?
Well, one thing I did recently is I stepped into this role at NRPA last year and noticed that we had a woeful underrepresentation of women on our board. Less than, I think we were at 18%. And so after having conversations with the board leadership and leading a very intensive recruitment process, which I'm so excited brought us Angelou. We approved, we voted on a slate of 5 women. It was an all women board slate. And now we're bringing that wonderful leadership and expertise into our organization. So one of the things that is really, really important, and this is something that I've been working on internally, is we run an annual conference, we host webinars, we invite speakers in, we recruit for volunteer committees. What's the composition of those groups? Making sure that there's gender balance, there's racial and ethnic representation, that we're paying attention to geography, we're paying attention to all these different facets of diversity, to ensure that the voices that people are hearing, the voices that we're lifting up, are reflective of the communities we serve. So that's something that's pretty tangible and I think really important. I also want to acknowledge to Latrice her observation about being in a room and being overlooked and not being listened to, and this just gravitational pull I think we have culturally towards the men in the room. That's something that's pervasive and it's persistent. So paying attention to those dynamics, paying attention to who's taking up airtime, trying to balance that out, creating openings for people to make sure that all voices in the room are heard. Those are some practical techniques that just really require awareness. Awareness and intention.
So true, so true. Mariana, you have anything you want to offer that in terms of how you help other women into leadership positions? Thanks, Christine.
There are many things. I think that I usually talk about my issues too, so that they relate to that and it doesn't feel like something that it's not part of your life, and that your professional life, your personal life are all part of the same thing. So, and I usually try to talk, well, I can't join this meeting because I have to do my kids' dinner. And that's fine, because it's actually a 7 p.m. meeting. So talking about that and not posing myself as this super leader who does it all, I think helps a lot. I think that as also like a women community where I work, we are much more, as Christine was telling, aware of some things that happen and we just used to let it go, Like the other day I was in a call and a man really interrupted me. I was talking and he started to talk and it was so strange for me. And I think it some years ago I would doesn't mind it. But then when he ended, I stopped talking. And when he ended, all the women in the room said, I want to listen to Mariana. I want to listen to Mariana. And it felt a little bit like, it really sounded bad. So I think that those kinds of behavior and reaction to that also help, to change the culture.
Great. Okay, I think we've got time for maybe 2 more questions. And I'm gonna again, these are from the chat room. Kobe, could you maybe give some insight into how we can get more women into this sector?
In my experience, actually, we are having the opposite problem. And it may be unique to my situation, but I feel that I'm experiencing that women are very drawn to our work. Women are because we are nurturers and caregivers. We are, and we don't shy away from problems. We, in a sense, are drawn to this global development context that we're finding ourselves in. I find that I work a lot with women in the climate space, in the biodiversity space, the sustainability space altogether. And in my office, for instance, I would say I don't have the figures. I had them, but we've recently made appointments. We're struggling to get the other side of the gender balance right. We're struggling to attract men to this position, to these type of jobs. We're a non-profit organization. I think firstly, men are more drawn to profit-based organizations. And secondly, I think women are drawn to the topic because they are mothers, they are caregivers, and they see the broken chain between humanity and planet Earth more clearly. So I would say, yes, we need more women in leadership positions, like, as I mentioned, mayors, presidents, ministers, etc., CEOs, etc. But in our world, in the NGO world where I live and work, we have fantastic women. And I just want to make the one point very quickly, and that is that I think with leadership comes the need to see every person as an individual. We should not want to push everybody to the fore and put them on a grandstand if they're not comfortable with it. Women lead in different ways, and sometimes it's the woman behind a desk that doesn't get to speak publicly, that's not on a forum like this, that also plays a very strong and vital leadership role in a company, and they should be recognized for what they do as well. So when people have kids, when people are in situations, let's just deal with the individual human being that they are, the personality that they are, and the individual case by case. And that's how I go about it. I don't think there's a foolproof recipe. We go through it, but if we do it with care in our hearts and humanity in our hearts and soul, we normally get it right, I think.
So true, Kobe, so true. All right, one last question. And I'm going to throw this out to Latrice. This question is in the chat room. I've embraced my gender diversity as a woman and leader and have found it to be freeing for me. Have you found freedom in embracing and living your true self?
Oh, yes. And I wish I found my voice earlier in my career. I think when I was younger in my career, sometimes I would not speak up on different issues for fear of, making someone angry or, fearing how they may view me. There's so many times when it's necessary to speak up in difficult situations. And I just never knew how to really own that. I think part of just getting older is, that fear kind of level goes down and your confidence goes up. But overall, I think, just being my true and authentic self has served me well. I think many people respect that even more in terms of leadership. Because you're willing to take a stand, you're willing to stand up for a specific purpose or a person. And people really respect and value that because they see that as a strength. There have been so many times when I've spoken up and, just spoken out and shared that vulnerability of saying, this is going to be difficult, but I feel like I have to say it, where people have come and pulled me aside to say, thank you for saying that. I didn't know how to, bring that up. I didn't know how to articulate that. That said, I would say in those cases too, I tell people in that moment, share that you agree, share your feelings, take that step to also own your voice. Don't necessarily pull me behind closed doors or send me that private chat, but really be open to agree so that you lift other women up and it's not just one woman's kind of putting themselves out there. So I do think that's one of those things that I wish I had started doing earlier in my career, is really owning my authentic voice. But, I'm 45 now. It's only going to get worse. My mouth is just going to go out the window.
So young.
I love it.
So good. Our time is up, and I again want to just thank all of you, Angelou, Christine, Claire, Kobe, Mariana, Latrice, for agreeing to be part of this panel. It has been so enriching for me, And I hope it's been enriching for you as well as people who have been paying attention. Such an important topic. You're all just amazing women. And I feel so privileged and honored to call you colleagues and friends. And I just want to thank you. And for those of you who've been listening in, thank you for dialing in. If you ever need something, please reach out to us, and enjoy the rest of the Congress. Thank you all so much.
Well done, Jane.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank
you,
you.
Jane.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Jane, you're amazing too.
Exactly.
Yes,
Oh, man.
exactly.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.